So, Elish, nice to have you on, my mate.
Thank you, Stevie. Thank you for having me.
Is it working?
Am I going crazy? I swear, like some police radio thing or something.
Shut up.
Just came through.
That's awesome.
Is that because we've been watching Stranger Things? That was so.
Oh, so have I.
Have you actually?
We've just gone into season 4.
I'm having such bad nightmares.
Oh, same.
I'm just like,
I'm used to it though, so
what's,
it's okay.
like, what's going on? What is going on in my nighttime life now?
Okay, the police have gone.
Okay.
Let's hope that was just
Okay.
a balloon.
But it sounds good though, yeah?
Sounds great.
Okay, right. I don't know where I'm talking to now. I think I'm talking to that now. Welcome to the Mentality Podcast. We're recording at the incredible Wheatwood Hall Hotel podcast studio. This is a podcast that goes way beyond stigma. We talk about men's mental health and mindset. We encourage the type of conversation that will open you up to another way to live life, another way to see yourself and the world around you. If you are ready for that, you're in the right place. I'm Stevie Ward and I'm an ex-professional rugby league player and captain, and now I guess I'm a bit of a podcaster, a speaker, actor, writer, entrepreneur. I'm still working all that out, but at Mentality we help men take control of their mindset by teaching them to find purpose, resilience, and what I believe is the new success: inner peace. That sounds good. If you are that guy who is waking up to the fact that they need to do something different in life and the same old habits aren't working for you, it might be time to step up. If you want to start your journey with us, you can go to mentality.co.uk/coaching to join the best team you have ever seen. Okay, so we've got Elish on the podcast. How are you doing, my mate?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's amazing to have you on. We met Elish about 3 months ago. Me and Natalie had checked in to an Airbnb in New York, not really knowing what was going on, not knowing what the hell we were doing in New York. We checked into an Airbnb. It wasn't clean. It was a disgrace. It looked like there was some weird sort of white powder still on a glass table when we checked in. So we thought, we're not staying here. It's flipping disgusting. We got on Hotels Tonight and we booked a hotel in the middle of Times Square. And we wouldn't usually do that. We hate Times Square because we're native New Yorkers. But we wouldn't usually do that. We got a deal. We went to Times Square, migraine city. The chaos was all around us. We met a friend called Jax, who is a trainer of the high flyers in New York City, as this man is. And Elish came in and we were introduced by a mutual friend, and Elish managed to bring some instruments in which I'd seen in monasteries on the TV, mostly on Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, near the intro. There's some of those instruments on there. And then he managed to take us from the madness to the monastery with breath work, with blowing into balloons, with meditation, and with some real honest, raw chats, which is my... He knew me. He knew what to go for. He knew to go for the honest and raw chats because that's exactly what we do and we love at Mentality. So Elish, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
That's where we met, and I've said to Elish ever since we met, Elish, I'd love to have you on a podcast because what you embody and your actions in the world are exactly what, we sort of try and get out there with Mentality, mate. It really is. He's the peaceful warrior. He is the peaceful warrior. So Elish, apart from my intro of our connection and those 2 hours in the madness of Times Square, could you tell us a bit about yourself? Could you tell us about your upbringing? What was the ideals? What were the scenarios in your upbringing, your background, and yeah?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that intro. It's riveting.
Yes.
I forgot you were talking about me.
Yeah. Who is this guy?
Yeah. Wow. He sounds great. Well, I grew up about an hour away from here, actually. So I grew up in New Jersey in a little town called Summit, New Jersey. I moved around a little bit in the area, But yeah, I was born there to my wonderful parents who, and this is an important detail, were refugees from the Vietnam War. So as you can imagine, that starts to mark my childhood.
Yeah.
So my parents were fairly traditional Vietnamese people. So my upbringing was in many ways very challenging. Very challenging. Two completely different cultures and no skills to be able to manage them. Yeah, I mean, my childhood was... Normally I have a lot to say about it. But it was pretty intense. It was pretty intense. I grew up very poor. My parents struggled a lot financially when I was growing up. So we started out living in Section 8 housing and relatively poor areas. And my father eventually found his way going back to school. Oh, no.
What this is, I'm so sorry.
There was a really loud siren going. Can you still hear him?
No, it's not the siren.
It's like an actual radio frequency.
Like, we speak on the radio. We're going to catch some zombies from Stranger.
Let's listen.
It only comes up at random times. I'm so sorry. You were just talking about that. And
All good.
Is it through there? Can you hear it?
No. I'm just like, I've never had that before. It's not that, is it?
No, it's definitely. It's like, yeah, we've got a. Da, 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 da. But I'm like, I don't know if it's coming through these or if it's like going to be on the recording. It's the most random, because this isn't like a.
It's not like a picking up radio frequencies, right?
No.
What is going on?
I mean, it's a good job you've listened to it because.
But maybe it's not even gonna be. Maybe that's not even gonna be on the recording.
Fillings in your teeth?
Am I? Is it me? This is so bizarre. We might just have to say, like, on the podcast, guys, like, we were just picking up some police interference. Some external mic picking up some clear audio from some radio or TV frequency.
Cool.
Oh my god, let's go fight crimes!
We can postpone this.
What are we going to do?
The city needs us.
So what do we do then? Does it say what you do if you get it? Just stop.
But we've never had that before, but I guess always where you've recorded podcasts, there's not police everywhere.
LAPD, NYPD.
NYPD. No, it isn't.
Was it?
Do you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Of course.
I love it.
Love that show. Raymond Holt's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, let's just fucking do it and just.
Well, if not, we can use
that,
the sound.
When it comes on. Do you want to?
I don't mind.
If I hear there's a murder on the loose, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
We can go.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Just open the window. I brought my cape.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'll just redo that question and then. So Elish, apart from my wacky introduction to you, what was your upbringing? What was your childhood?
So I grew up the son of two Vietnamese refugees from the Vietnam War. I grew up about an hour away in Summit, New Jersey, in central Jersey, in that area. I could go into so much detail about it. It's funny because...
Do it.
Oh my God. Well, started on a Tuesday. No. Well, I guess the relevant part to our conversations is that my childhood was, for me, really difficult because, you know, my parents had really, really hard lives. My mom especially, like horrifically difficult lives. And so I was a child who inherited a lot of that difficulty. Difficulty with knowing who you are, with knowing anything other than how to survive. So I grew up in a household to parents whose primary occupation was survival. You know, my dad left Vietnam on the day the war ended. His family followed a bunch of American soldiers to a fishing boat, and they took them on the boat and took like a 2-week boat ride over to Guam. So that's the kind of situation my dad was in. So my parents grew up with a lot of hardship. So they're very, very strict very adamant about financial security, making sure you're working really hard. Like they had to fight their way just to kind of survive in America. Like they came to America without knowing any English. So for them, that's all they knew was how to survive and just how to get by. So that was a lot of my childhood. Was I had to do really well in school. I had to be really good at everything. I was constantly being compared to my cousins, to people around me. My parents placed extraordinarily high expectations on me and my sister too. So it was tough because, unlucky for my parents, they raised a child who did not fit the traditional mold that American society was geared towards. I did not do that well in school. Absolutely hated rules. My parents, who just wanted so badly to just be secure and safe and not have to worry about having their lives ripped away again, had a child who was in many ways very, very rebellious, very, very rebellious. And I think that was kind of a representation of the struggle that I had internally, like growing up at home with these expectations in a society that had no understanding of it. Like I grew up, I was like, me and my sister were like two of like maybe 5 Asian people in my school, like everyone else being white and of, rather affluent background for the most part. So I had a really hard time fitting in, finding my niche, my space. So I found a lot of myself and my ability actually in sport. So I was not an academic kid. I learned, instead of actually learning how to study and practice really hard, how do I lie my way through school? How do I fake everything so that I don't have to do this treacherous thing called reading and math? So I grew up as a pretty good athlete, I would say. Started out playing baseball and then found my way to tennis, which was, I guess, where my first real solid identity started to form. I poured everything into sport and competition, whether it was physical sport or esports, because I also played a lot of video games.
Is that where you got most of your joy and freedom from then when you played sport? Like, can you remember many other occasions when you were younger?
Did I get my freedom playing sport? No, I think in sport, I got the chance to feel like I was better than people.
Yeah, that's a good
so
feeling,
maybe
isn't it?
free from my own deeper sense of inadequacy. Because, if you looked at my training regimen when I was playing tennis, which is my only real serious sport, actually, no, it's actually the remnants of it in every sport I did. Because my dad only knows how to work really hard. He's like, you work really hard and you be the best. My dad's the kind of person who came from absolutely nothing in Vietnam, playing soccer in the streets with their combined socks, playing barefoot, and then becoming one of the most successful network engineers in the world. Right? My dad's like, you mean just become the best? Like, just be good at everything. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. You got to work really hard. Just do it. So, like, the way my dad trained me growing up, once he started to see I was getting really good. It was like, okay, minimum 4 hours a day during the week after school. Weekends, you're on the court all day. We're talking like 8-hour days, 10-hour days sometimes. So there was no freedom.
Yeah, okay.
There was no freedom, but I had the opportunity to be someone, which was, I think, why it was so important to me.
That's big, in it, when you're a youngster, to like have that vision of becoming something,
Yeah, especially because I had such big shoes to fill. To myself, I was always, on the surface, I felt like I was kind of like a big dog at whatever I was doing, but inside I was very horribly insecure. So I needed to be someone because my parents needed me to be someone.
What do you think the insecurity was from?
Oh man,
I
isn't
know
that the question?
We're going into because I've asked it about myself, and it's something that I'm doing a podcast series with the mentality counselor, and there's a possibility to go really deep and look into it, and
it goes so deep. My goodness.
But I'm like, is anyone free from it? I'm like, is it just everyone's going to have some sort of insecurities, and do you know what I mean? It's like different tastes or variations, and
I think if there's a possibility of being insecure, there's a possibility of being free from insecurity, to be perfectly secure. It just has to be the case. Whether or not we realize it doesn't change the fact that it has to be the case. I mean, the relative world is one of polarities. So if there is insecurity, there has to be security. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Where does it come from? Where does the insecurity come from for me? Immediately, I think about my mom's upbringing. My mom never knew her father. Her family was split up when she was really young. Her mom wasn't in the picture for a lot of her younger life. My mom started working when she was 5. She was scrubbing floors and cleaning houses to get 2 meals a day and a little bit of money to bring home to her family. She had a bunch of siblings, and they all didn't live under the same house. They got split up because they just couldn't be, they had to have other families raise them because my mom's mom couldn't afford it. And then she just eventually kind of split and did her own thing. So I think the insecurity comes from, is represented in that. My mom never had security from the get-go. She never knew a father. She never knew a normal family. She never knew what it was like to have food on the table that she didn't have to work for. She only ever knew what it was like to have immense responsibility and no room for error. So my mom struggled, and she had a lot of horrible things happen to her. So I can only imagine. I mean, I don't even need to imagine. I know that's where a lot of it comes from. Like, my mom had to fight really, really, really hard just to survive. And to this day, my mom is the kind of person that still lives that reality. And to the outside world, she is the most loving and giving person ever. And she is. But the darker side of that, it's a necessity for her. It's her identity. It's the only way she ever knew how to be someone. Only way she
Giving.
Only value she had growing up was to be the provider, the problem solver. So if we try to answer the question from, I guess, a spiritual bent, something a little bit more beyond personhood, it's a disconnection from who you are. Not knowing the truth of who you are. And how can you know who you are if you came out of the womb and already had labels and roles placed upon you, right? You have to do this and do that. And any time that you have, which is very little, you all kind of feel bad for taking because like, oh, that means I could be doing more to take care of the people that I have to take care of. Yeah. And my dad was very much the same thing. So, I don't see myself as anyone separate from my parents or anyone before me. So when you ask me the question, where does the insecurity come from? The tip of the iceberg is my parents' lives. And then the rest of it is everyone else's life before them, is where they came from.
It's just like mapped on those tactics and grooves, I guess, in how they live their life and how they've learned it and repeated it and behaved it again and again has been mapped onto you. Yeah,
that's the reality I came into. If everyone has their own model and map of reality, the child is born in the intersection between their parents or their developmental figures in society and everything like that. So that was the track that I was born onto.
Yeah, I want to dive into that, but I think it's going to come a bit later. The tennis then. So you didn't feel free playing tennis. You felt...
There were times I couldn't. Okay, so I don't want to paint too black and white of a picture, but tennis was a time where I could feel really good, feel really accomplished. So though from one perspective there was no freedom, there were times when the conditions were right, when I could feel as if I was really limitless. I have memories right now just kind of flashing through my mind of times on the court where when I was in my element, like the thing that I was really well known for was my feet and then my serve. So when I was on and I was just there, just usually by myself with a hopper of balls, and my dad would be like, hey, don't come home for 2 hours. Right? Don't even try to come home before that. And then stay longer if you can. I would just have a bunch of hoppers of balls, hitting serves. And then when I was on fire, that was, I guess you could say, was my big taste of freedom. It wasn't even competition. I was terrible in competition.
Yeah.
Like my coaches would tell me that they would get calls from all the college coaches asking if I'm still a head case.
Yeah.
Because I was like the best practice player, one of the best practice players from the group of people that I played with. But as soon as you put me on a court with an umpire in the chair, it was like I had never played tennis before.
Yeah.
Right. It's like all of a sudden the court got really small and the ball got really small. Right. But yeah, there were times where I really did feel free and accomplished.
And why do you think when the umpire came about, you felt smaller? Why do you think that is?
Anyone of authority that was there to judge me.
Okay.
Right. Like my parents, my dad got banned from my tennis tournaments by my mom because if I made a mistake,
staring down at you.
Yeah, he would just look at me and be like, I could just like feel, oh, what's that feeling? Oh, yeah. Dad's looking at me.
Something on me. There's something on me.
My dad would look at me and then he would just nod his head. Right. So anything that would remind me that there was a chance that I could fail. Mm-hmm. Anything that would remind me that there was a chance of losing. I think that got tied up a lot with feeling alone, being kind of forced to face the fact that I'm not good enough at something. So when those stakes were on the table, it was very hard for me to perform. Very hard for me to perform. I would choke like crazy all the time. I would be doing really well, like up, 6'2", 5'1", and still somehow lose.
Well, tennis is so like clear in terms of performing well and not performing well. Like in rugby, you can sort of merge into a team performance, and other people can drop the ball if you like. But in tennis, literally, it's just you. The points are so clear, faults. There's a word fault embedded in the game.
Yeah.
And I can see how playing tennis, you can almost get in your own head. Like Nick Kyrgios, he doesn't get in his own head. He just puts it out there, doesn't he? And he just shows everyone how he's feeling, what he's doing. But I can see in tennis how confidence can just falter and diminish over 2 or 3 sort of points.
Yeah. For me, for who I was, it was a very, very hard situation to be in.
Yeah, and limitless. You said you felt limitless at times when the pressure was off, when people weren't watching. How did that feel?
Oh, you feel like Superman.
Yeah,
you feel like you can almost feel that there's a future for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because for me, it was like, that's going to be my ticket into the future. I wasn't good at school. My parents wanted to be someone in finance, as some kind of high-level business person, a doctor, a lawyer, anything like that. I knew I wasn't going to make it doing that. But sport was the one thing I knew I was the best athlete in my entire family. Right? And my dad was the best athlete amongst his siblings. So it was like, oh, not only was I really good at that, this is the only way I can keep up with my dad.
Do you feel a lot of pressure to keep up to your dad's sprint into hard work and achievement?
There's a part of me that does feel that. As my dad is also my absolute hero. Mm-hmm. But these days, as I've come to know myself, I've come to do so much work over the last, almost 10 years. When I'm in my element, when I'm my most clear, there is no competition. Right? I am who I am, and I am at peace and very deeply fulfilled by the fact that I'm not trying to win anything. I am here to be a good person, to help people to find happiness, and to share it with them. And that's it. Mm-hmm. So the competitive aspect, needing to keep up with my dad's achievements, a part of me also knows I am both there and beyond it.
Yeah.
Because in some sense, because of my father, I've been able to kind of continue on and ask the deeper questions of who I am.
That's true.
To not have to ask, I don't have to worry about survival because of my parents. Yes. So now I can, in my mind, go to the next level and ask, who is it that was surviving? Who is it that is achieving something? And what does that mean?
So that journey then through tennis, can you tell us a little bit about that and how you progressed from that point? Obviously competing in tennis, weightlifting as well, and a few injuries.
In powerlifting and strongman. Yeah, so I played tennis. I had hopes of of playing on the ITF Pro Tour. So I did join the ITF Pro Tour and was planning to play some Futures and Satellites tournaments. And then when I was 18, went snowboarding for the first time and broke my wrist.
Yeah.
And it never healed. So my career was done.
How did that feel?
I actually got asked that really recently. Right?
Yeah.
And I think the honest answer was the deepest part of me was so relieved. Relieved. Oh my God. I love tennis. And to this day, I love playing. But a part of me was really relieved. Also, a part of me didn't really care. Right. The part of me that did care was more worried about what my parents would say. Yeah. Like, oh my God, you idiot. You just ruined your college scholarship. You just ruined everything. But yeah, I was okay with it. I was okay with it. Yeah. So after that, that was college for me. So I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey, joined an Asian interest fraternity, did frat boy things, got into bodybuilding. Bodybuilding got me into powerlifting. So bodybuilding and powerlifting were my other route for kind of feeling bigger. Feeling, it was, just the continuation of that kind of inner narrative, inner story, a hero's journey, whatever you want to call it. So, and that's kind of like, I guess what I inherited from my dad. If you can do it, get really, really freaking good at it. So I was bodybuilding, and then I was just really angry at myself because I was still really weak compared to everyone else. Like, I was like, damn it, I'm trying to build muscle, but I'm so weak compared to my friends. So I was like, what's the easiest solution for that? And powerlifting was the thing. So I went to powerlifting. I fell in love with powerlifting. And I was really good at deadlifting. I just went head on into powerlifting. And this was after I graduated from school. So I was working in finance. I hated it. Oh,
I can't think of anything worse. Honestly,
there's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than that. And I have an immense amount of respect for anyone that finds joy and fulfillment in doing that. That is just not me.
I'm the same. Honestly, I'm the same. My mind does not work like that. I feel the stress levels rising. As soon as I look at numbers, I'm like, I know there's something really wrong with me, but I just can't do it. And I think I felt that throughout my life, and I've been further and further peeling away from it. And now when I do it, I'm like, I can't flip and read it. I'm like, what am I meant to do with this? What am I meant to do with it?
Yeah, it was like, it wasn't my thing. So I didn't have the motivation to do whatever I needed to do. I remember I ended up in Southside commercial real estate. And I remember my supervising brokers. I got that job through a friend. So my friend vouched for me. I was awful. I was so awful. He was having me go through, I don't even know, just had stacks of properties. And I had to input them and get all these information. And I was just like, oh, where do I copy paste all this from? So I would go online, get the information, copy paste it. And then next thing you know, I got fired. But before I got
probably
fired,
happy about that as well.
Oh, I was really happy about that because that was actually when I started getting back into powerlifting. I was getting into bodybuilding and powerlifting, so I was really excited about that. So at the time I got fired, I was actually in control of a bunch of my coworkers' fitness and nutrition. I was writing their programs. I was spending more time writing their programs than I was doing my actual job. So that's obviously why I got fired. But then that's when I had the idea, and I was like, okay. I love powerlifting. I love bodybuilding. I know what it's like to train really hard. Right? I might not study hard, but I know for a fact that no one outworks me in the gym. Right? Like, that's my element. You can't beat me there. So I was like, I had a fraternity brother who's a really, highly attained personal trainer here in New York City. I spoke to him. He's like, yeah, I'll get you a job at the gym that I work at. It was at Equinox on 33rd and Park. So I told my dad, I remember getting off the train. I was like, Dad, I got fired. He just looks at me. He's, what? It's like, and I think I want to be a personal trainer. And he goes, what? And then he laughed. He thought it was a joke. So he was like, okay, fine. Go be a personal trainer. So he thought it was going to be one of those situations where I was going to go in for 2-3 weeks and realize it was a stupid idea. He tried to convince me. He's like, what about your financial security? You're not going to make a lot of money. And then he was like, all right, fine. And then here I am now, many, almost 10 years later. And Yeah, just about 10 years later. But yeah, so I went into strongman and powerlifting. And that was where, again, I was really good. And then, with that drive to be better and better, I started dipping into steroids. So that made me even better as a powerlifter. There's going to be a lot of people that might know me that are listening to this and now realizing that during that time of my competition, I was juiced to the gills. Good honesty, right? It's coming out now.
That's what we like. That's what we're all about here.
So I got, it was such an important thing for me to be strong. It was it was the thing that I was really good at. Like very few people at that time could put more weight on a bar at my body weight and move it.
Tell us what the weight was.
My best ever was back in about 2015. I was 190 pounds. I deadlifted 725 pounds, squatted 650 pounds, and bench pressed 365. Yeah, so
we're just going to talk all podcast now about personal training and how to get to that weight. Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, you get to that weight by being out of your mind.
Yeah.
Out of your mind. Nowadays, it's not very impressive. Nowadays, that there are natural powerlifters half my size that are moving way more weight. But anyways, at the time, that was my thing.
It's impressive for not in it, I think.
Oh my God, I'm happy when I live to 25.
Yeah. We just got light,
Yeah. But yeah, that was my life. That became my next obsession. And so strongman and powerlifting, I was competing. I was doing really well. I became a very successful personal trainer in New York City. And then I don't know really when it really, really began, but then I got injured really badly and had to stop training for 2 years. I remember it was the last squat session before a big competition of mine. Had sponsors that were ready to be, they're going to be at the competition, expecting me just to scout me out. And my last squat was supposed to be easy. It was 601 pounds. I was supposed to be able to hit that for like sets of 6 to 8. I only needed to hit 1 rep. Got into the bottom and then pop, pop, pop. 3 pops. And then I just collapsed into the weight. And I didn't feel any pain. Right? So I was like, let me try that again. Right? So I put the weight back on the bar.
So obvious to try that again.
Yeah, right? Like, I'm not dying. And there's no bleeding or no bruising. Yeah. And my hip kind of feels good now, but it turns out because the tendon tore. So the tension I was feeling beforehand
Don't
was
need
just
it. Don't need it. Get rid of it,
right? Went for it again and finished it. Done. And then I was out for 2 years. And that's when the next phase of my life began. But that was sport for me up till then. That was my place of accomplishment. That was my niche. That's where I felt like I was like, okay, this is where I was meant to be. This is where I'm really good. And I know I'm really good. And I'm better than most people there. So I'm safe. Safe from feeling like as worthless as I did inside.
So when the hip popped, how did you feel?
Scared.
Yeah.
I was scared. It was how I should have felt with tennis, right? Or how you would expect me to feel during tennis. I was like, oh no, my future with this sport. I felt so good putting in 4-hour workouts 4 to 5 times a week. And I was like, now I couldn't even sit in a car, right? So how I felt was, I was devastated. Especially since it wasn't healing. It wasn't healing on any reasonable. I've had herniated discs. I've sprained each of these ankles in the double digits. And there's always that tradition. It gets worse for a few days and it starts to get better. And you're like, okay, things are going to be fine. This just never got better.
Yeah, well.
Never got better. So, yeah, I was devastated.
So you mentioned that was your obsession a little bit earlier. Do you feel like you need something to be obsessed over?
I as myself or people in general feel like need to be obsessed?
You said like yourself, like I think it's something that I think I need a target, and you spoke about your upbringing, you spoke about your work that you'd put into the tennis. You were doing 4-hour days on the court, and then you had this other avenue to go forward with. And I'm asking because I'm in a position where I'm working out what's next for myself. And I think it's like my mind needs the content, or it needs the mission, or it needs the input or the journey or the mission to obsess over, for that to be the I think as a rugby player, it was like all consuming, and the fuel that I could put into that, backed by similar stuff to you, where you wanted to feel better, you wanted to feel like you're mastering those nerves that I had before a game, when I'm thinking I'm going to the toilet 3 or 4 times because I'm that nervous, because I want to play well, I want to do my best, and I want to just literally deliver what I know I can, you know. And it was like a cycle, the weeks on the weeks on the weeks that, you know, that I'd come and go, and I'd have the opportunity to step over the whitewash, and I'd just be on then, and I'd feel at times limitless, like you said. So you've come to this point in your life where you've had the tennis as a vehicle, you've had the weightlifting, you had the finance, which you struggle to get obsessed over.
I didn't even try. It just wasn't happening.
Yeah. And you find the obsession through the training. Like, where did you come to then after your hip had popped? What was that place for you? You know, how did you navigate that part of your life, and did you feel a bit lost in terms of where the direction your mind would go?
Yeah, definitely a big part of me felt very lost without that identity, without the identity that I assumed en route to the goals that I have. Do I need something to be obsessed over? I think we need to aspire to something. I think we need some kind of very intense aspiration as a source of the energy, motivation, inspiration to find meaning in life. So it's an interesting question, just coming from spirit, coming from a spiritual standpoint. You can think of the need to accomplish something, the need to be on track, the need to be en route to something bigger, as inherently a dualistic way of being in the world. Then there's the world of non-duality, the world of so-called enlightenment, where you realize that there is no one to be, nothing to do, nothing that has ever or will ever be accomplished in the dualistic sense. There is a reality beyond that, also inherently fulfilling and perfect and whole, in which this moment as it is enough. And you don't need to be sweating and bleeding to become someone or to do something. So that's kind of why I kind of like trying to wrap my head around.
And that's why I wanted to ask you it, because I think what we're going to move into now is, obviously you spent a lot of time in the physical, the tennis player, the weightlifter, the powerlifter. Your hip popped, and then you've got to this point where I think we'll talk about the progression from that. But I'm going to slip a few questions in there for what I've been considering, you know, in this point of transition in my life, where I have lots of inspirations from how I've lived my life up to date, and then there's lots of inspirations from, like you said, the spiritual side of it, the sort of fulfillment way that you look at the world, and then there's the sort of the striving, the achieving, and it's like, you know, how do you balance these energies? That's one question that I wanted to pose to you, because we'll talk about your career now as a trainer, someone who physically will help people train, PT, but you're also training people, and is the right word to say training people, with meditation. You're teaching them with meditation, and also guiding psychedelic trips. So that balance, out what line do you live on with those balance of so many diverse things? And to get obsessed with something, I guess you need to get lost a little bit in something. So yeah, that's the backdrop to it.
Oh, I love that question. I love exploring that area, that topic. A part of me begs to ask the question, you know, how do we define obsessed? How do we define obsessed? If we think of, you know, when I think of obsession, and I think this is kind of in line with most people's idea of obsession, is that there is this desperate need to accomplish that thing. I will not be whole without that. This is my focus. And I think at the root of the word obsession as I know it is that at the other end of that obsession is my worthiness. Otherwise, how else, to the common person, to the average person, how else do we mobilize or even tap into and then mobilize the inspiration in order to accomplish those things? Because to be obsessed with something, in my mind, what you're really hoping to achieve is something damn near impossible.
Yeah.
Right? It's intense. It's not like, it's not like I'm just going to become a good powerlifter. It's like, no, I'm going to lift every weight in the room, blood shooting out of my nose, my bones breaking. That's what I want. I want to be the best at what I do. And the only way to accomplish, not the only way, but probably the easiest way to accomplish that is the only way you can really do it is if you believe at the other end of that path is your inherent wholeness, your ultimate fulfillment.
So what happened then when you had to put down the barbell, if you like, and stop training and pursuing that? What was the transition for you there?
Oh, it was tough. It was hard. It was so hard. Oh, man. That was really the beginning of my kind of spiritual journey. It's still ongoing to this day. It was really hard. And I was married at the time. Marriage fell apart. I was so lonely. I was so unhappy, so depressed. And at the same time had a hyper-driven ego. Not only was I depressed, I also needed to somehow be the person that was the complete opposite of that. Couldn't let anyone see it. No, actually, it's not even like I even had the option. I didn't see it enough in myself to be able to communicate to anybody. I was completely lost, so confused. All I knew was achieve, achieve, achieve. So when I stopped being able to achieve anything in lifting, I tried to do it through work. I tried to do more sessions. I tried to make more money. I tried to get smarter. And I think as all that was happening, all this pent up inner turmoil was surfacing, growing and surfacing and surfacing and surfacing until it popped. Ended up, me and my ex-wife, we ended up separating. Right? And then I ended up getting into another relationship too quickly. So I never had a chance to heal, never had a chance to really process anything, never even had the skills to do so, even if I did have the space to do that. So my life for the next 5 or 6 years after that point was tragically difficult. Nearly committed suicide 4 or 5 times. I didn't know what to do. That's what led me to psychedelics in the first place.
Yeah. Well, what do you think pushed you to that point? What did that feel like?
I just didn't know. All I knew was that there was something horribly wrong. I wasn't feeling good. At the time, I was blaming other people. I was blaming everything else. I just didn't know how to deal with this pain, this sense of loss and grief. A lot of it, I'm sure, I inherited from my parents. I was born with this expectation to be someone. And now all the ways in which I felt like I could do that were taken away from me. So in some sense, I had all this angst, all this desperation, this obsession with becoming someone and no way to achieve it. And I think that ultimately amounted to me feeling completely and utterly worthless. Incompetent. I was just so confused. And ending my life was the only way I thought I would be free from that.
So you've had those feelings and you've had that sort of, that moment where you said popped. What was on the other side of that and what made you feel like you came away from feeling like that?
Oh, I remember it was my first LSD trip.
How did that come about?
All right. Well, I started, I was deep in my own shit, right? And I don't really even clearly remember, but I was somehow investigating solutions for depression. And psilocybin mushrooms came up, right? And I don't know why. I had an affinity for it. Like, I never really did drugs. Like, I struggled to smoke weed Like the only other thing I did was drink alcohol in college, but I'm also allergic to alcohol, so I didn't do that very much either. So
You popped then as well.
Right. So I was just like, whoa, mushrooms, psychedelics. So I pursued it. And I searched for months and months trying to get my hands on magic mushrooms. I ended up getting my hands on magic mushrooms, and the first trip was a complete dud. I ended up taking the equivalent of 7 grams of dried mushrooms, which is an astronomical amount to the average person. Nothing. I remember I was sitting in the bathroom of my girlfriend's apartment because she was kind of freaking out. And I was just like, I don't feel anything. And I saw a little hint of green on the wall, and I knew the wall wasn't green. I was like, oh, got a little bit of something. But that didn't quench my thirst. I was like, no. I just didn't get it. I didn't get it right. So I ended up getting my hands on more mushrooms and then LSD at the same time. And I remember being on the roof of my apartment building. And I had taken just half a tab of LSD and also like maybe 2 grams of mushrooms. So I took it together and I had an experience.
Just to make sure.
Yeah, just to make sure. And I had an experience. I was feeling amazing. I was looking and the walls were melting and reality was melting. And internally, my construct of self and reality was opening up. And it was brilliant. It was amazing. I went onto the roof. And this I consider to be my first awakening. I went onto the roof and I was on the tallest residential building in Bushwick, Brooklyn at the time. So I had a perfect view of the skyline. And I'm looking over at the Empire State Building. And the skyline was like a carnival. Lights were flashing and blinking. And I remember the Empire State Building was just a swirl of lights going up into the sky. And I was, oh, this is beautiful. Life is so beautiful. This is incredible. And then I had this very profound experience where I became spontaneously aware that I was perceiving the universe. I became aware that I was aware of life happening. And then in my mind's eye, what ended up happening was from every other sentient being in the area around me, from every window, from every person on the street, I saw a spotlight coming from their eyes, coming from these windows. And it was like a movie projector. So it was projecting something onto this universe. And each person's projection ended up opening up to my entire visual field. So we were all contributing our own perceptions to the universe. And I had this moment, and I'm looking out, and I was like, there is no universe out there that is not, that is isolated and separate, that we're all viewing objectively. The universe out there is the amalgam of everyone's subjective experience. Right? So it's because of them that this is here. I'm not looking at something that everyone else is looking at. We're all looking at something completely different. And those experiences coming together make the universe. A rather shallow insight in the grand scheme of things. But it was enough for me. Like what popped was my perception of the world. And now, instead of attaining greatness or achieving more through the lens of the physical body, it was now through perception. It was like, actually, that entire universe where I needed to be the powerlifter, I needed to be the rich person, I needed to be the most highly attained person, that's actually only one universe. And there's infinite possibility out there that I can explore. There's so much more.
It makes so much sense though, because you're talking about perception. Like mental health literally is the only thing that we really have. It's like, it's how we perceive the world, it's how we see it, it's how we register information, it's how we filter information, it's how we decide what we're going to listen to, what we're not going to listen to, what we deem important, what we don't. So we literally do create that universe, or we do map out everything that's going on inside our heads onto whatever this is, that sort of realization is why I feel so strongly about mental health. And also why art is created, why, all these different parts of society are so strong. But you could sit down and you could watch a film and there's no way that you can watch that film and be sure that someone next to you has seen the same things that you have, you know, or got the same message. And it's like everyone's just going through this this world where it's what we make of it. So that was your first sort of realization. Did you have any understanding of spirituality at this point?
I had a little bit, naturally, if you end up in the same area as psychedelics, you also end up in the same area as religion and spirituality. I had a little bit of an idea of Hinduism, right, and things like that. But I hadn't actively started pursuing it yet. Yeah, I didn't really have any idea. Like I was more very scientifically, materially minded, very logic based. Right, so I wasn't really thinking about a god or anything like that. It was just kind of the nature of this reality as I see it, the nature of the universe as I see it, without having to turn to traditional religious schema in order to make sense of it. So yeah, I didn't really have any firm footing in spirituality. Though I probably would have said I did, but in retrospect, I didn't.
Yeah. So, like, did you just, from this sort of awakening that you mentioned and this understanding, did you start combining that with the personal training that you do? Because as we stand here now, we sit here now, you're a personal trainer. You take people on psychedelic trips and you teach meditation, but you've also gone and done a lot of meditation work yourself. What was in that decision to go and do that? What was the impetus for you to go and do that?
So for meditation specifically, I came to meditation specifically as a way of being able to explore psychedelics more. That was, I think, that was my vehicle for being able to go deeper into the psychedelic experience. So psychedelics really came first for me, and everything's branched out of that. As far as how that integrated with the rest of my life and my career, that didn't really come intentionally until much later, maybe the last couple of years. Though I was obsessed with it. I called it my unintentional and self-proclaimed mushroom internship, where when I started working with mushrooms, I tripped every week for a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've got over 300 trips under my belt. And meditation was the support for that experience. So I learned to meditate, not in the way that I meditate now, but I learned some kind of practice of self-inquiry and self-investigation, internal exploration, some skills for that in order to navigate my psychedelic experiences more.
You've literally switched worlds there then, haven't you? You've literally dived into another world. Yeah, like for a year,
Yeah. I had my reality and my understanding.
You went traveling.
Yeah, totally shattered. Shattered my traditional way of seeing things, of understanding myself. And I've explored a lot of very crazy territory when it comes to the mind through the help of a lot of psychedelics at first, and then a lot through just straight sober meditation. Yeah, anything you want to talk about there? I could talk about the integration with my career, but it's not as exciting as the maverick and my maverick dive into.
What was the progression there? So you've done it every week.
Yeah, it was every week, and then do more and more and more. So I ended up at one point taking close to 5 tabs of LSD, and then another point taking 10 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms. Oh man. The stories I could tell you, my friend. I ended up, I've worked with, to be politically correct, I've worked with most psychedelics. Yeah, I worked a lot with DMT, with ayahuasca, with the cactus medicines, with mushrooms, with marijuana, obviously, with a lot of those things. So I really, that was my trajectory. It's just like more and more mushrooms, and then more different ways of accessing the psychedelic space. So different medicines, different substances, different cultures.
So what you said, like you completely shattered your traditional view of the world, right? So what did you, doing that much trips, right? You shattered it, but then you've done enough to surely wipe it away. Like what's left, and what is there remnants of this traditional view of?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. We need to have a view. We need to have a view that makes sense, with which we can interface and communicate with everyone. Yeah, you know, it wasn't like, oh, this is useless. Let me throw out the window. I'm now a lizard, right? I'm just going to be a lizard, right? No, it was there is this world that we live in, right? This human world that we live in, and we have physical needs, emotional needs.
Yeah.
We have social needs, all these kinds of things. And there's still, that forms largely the backbone. I mean, along with the constraints of the physical universe out there, tells us, and society tells us how we're going to accomplish that. And I still am a regular ass person with my neuroticisms and all that kind of stuff. But what's different? What's really different, and what my belief is, and what's absolutely true conceptually. The difference is just understanding that the way that we are conditioned to see the world is we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as those before us have seen it, right? And there's a conceptual mapping to it. I do this little exercise with a lot of people that, a lot of my students and a lot of my friends. I ask them a simple question, like, what is this? Like, oh, it's a cup of water on a table that just made a sound. Like, is it? Is it really that? Where is the cup? Right? You say, it's this thing. No, this is glass. Where's the cup? Well, the glass is the cup. Okay, let's know. Okay, this is not a cup. This is glass. It's like, but where's the glass? How do you know it's glass? If we all had the consensus to call this a turtle, it would be a turtle, right? But where is the glass? Where's the cup? And I'm not necessarily saying that this doesn't exist, because it implies that this is inherently a cup, right? But it's not. It's holding down this thing that we also happen to call what do we call this?
We say coaster.
Coaster.
Yeah.
Coaster. It's actually something that we put on a coaster, let alone drink a liquid from. No, it's actually something that I might throw across the room if I'm enraged. It could be a weapon, right? It could be a way of seeing the world slightly differently. What's different is just my understanding that this is not a cup, but it makes sense to call it one. Right? It makes sense to describe it conceptually by its function, cup, holding water, because it's easier to drink water from a cup than from my hand.
So that makes sense, right? So we, for ease, we call it a cup, we call it a coaster, call it a table. Does that blend into life when we call something a fuck up, or we call something, trauma, we call something... Anything.
Call it anything. It's not it.
Yeah.
It's only that from a very particular standpoint. So the only reason why anyone would ever be a fuck up is if the person who sees them is capable of seeing someone as a fuck up. That concept has been ingrained for them. But if you've never been told what a fuck up is, if you've never used those words, if they don't even have the concept in your culture of someone being less, someone being a complete error to society, then the response to that's a fuck up is, what's a fuck up?
Yeah.
What's that? What does that mean? So I try to live more from that place, to integrate that understanding. That this is not a cup, but a cup is what I call it. Right? Which then allows us to understand that whatever it is we judge something to be is not inherently it. It is just a representation of what that thing appears to be from this position. I think of the art exhibits where, you look at it from the front, you see the image. You look at it from the sides, just scramble of junk. You don't see anything. You have to see it from one particular standpoint, and then it all comes together and is this really cohesive piece of art. It's very clear. You step 1 inch to the right, it is no longer that. That's how life is. So whatever something appears, in my perspective, whatever something appears to be for you, you're not looking at the truth. You are looking at how things are organized from your position, and your position is dictated by your conditioning, the way that you have been trained and conditioned to see the world. So these days, you look at someone like, oh, that guy's a fuck up. He's not strong enough. Right? He's not a leader. he's not able to cope with this. He has to cry. He has to have emotions. I look at that person and I don't see that. I see how that other person could see him that way, because I see what beliefs they have to hold in order to be able to judge someone that way. I see a person. I see a human being who appears to be struggling with whatever's going on. A human being who, at their most basic nature, only wants a few things, which is to feel connected to the world, to love and be loved, to feel secure or to feel safe. Every human being, as far as I'm concerned, first and foremost wants those things. That forms the lens. We don't want to do bad things. We don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to hurt other people. Even when we believe we want to hurt other people, we don't want to hurt other people. So when I see that situation, I see that person, I see someone who, in their own way, I am getting a snapshot of where they are on their pursuit of loving, being loved, feeling connected, knowing who they are, and feeling safe and secure within themselves. Right? That's all I know. Any story I can say beyond that, generality, because that's extremely general. When I'm in my clear state, I know I believe that about everyone. Beyond that, I don't know anything.
So that's you speak to people and you would want to understand where they are within those 4 paradigms, and then you could map out a certain, I don't want to say program or regime, or a certain way to work with them.
Is that say an axis of development or something like that? Yeah.
Just a quick one, guys. We have had 2 new counsellors join the team here at Mentality. If you are at a stage in life where you are struggling to manage your mind and it keeps affecting your happiness, it is time to do something about it. You can finally allow yourself the time to sit down with one of our Mentality counsellors who will understand what you are going through. They'll help you understand why you are struggling, and they'll give you the tools to get back to being happy and the best that you can be. A lot of the time, we just need to clear up any unwanted thoughts and emotions so that we can show up in life the way that we want to. Mentality counselling is available in Yorkshire, Lancashire and the South East, including London. Sessions can be in person, face-to-face therapy or walking therapy. Alternatively, all counsellors can deliver sessions via Zoom. Go to mentality.co.uk/counselling to start your journey.
As you're going through that 1.5 years of them intense trips, how did that influence your relationships? Because relationships are the interesting one, because they're active, they're dynamic. You can be going through this journey of having this dismantling of your own perception and understanding of life existence, which is just everything that we ever have. But then relationships are a bridge between where you were before and a relationship. For example, my relationship with Stevie, I have how I view it. That relationship also holds how he views it and how it's viewed by the rest of the world as well. All at once, that relationship kind of encompasses all of that together. But when you're going through such a drastic shift in your perception, and probably something that I can imagine most people would happen over 10, 20 years, you kind of had it over 1.5 years or even almost overnight with some kind of trips. How did that impact relationships?
Oh, man. Okay. It was very difficult because it felt like I was going insane. I felt like I was going insane. And I was having all these insights about the universe and about the reality. This is not real. This is not real. None of this is real. Not really knowing what I meant by that either, but the way I saw things was changing so much that I was starting to derive fulfillment and find energy in things that just people didn't even relate to, I had no contact with. right? So, specifically with my ex-wife, I just started drifting further and further and further away. She was living her life the way she knew how to live her life. And, though she did dive a little bit with psychedelics and into the psychedelics with me, she never had an affinity for that kind of inquiry or experience. She was largely who she was. I was drastically changing. And now all of a sudden, the puzzle pieces that used to fit before stopped fitting. The game changed. So it was, everything, like you said beautifully, everything just got dismantled. Right? I didn't, part of me was like, all I wanted to talk about was how all the things that destabilized people. Like, you think you are who you are? Who are you? Right? Who sees from behind your eyes? Right? I have seen a world that exists overlaid on this that is nothing like this. Right? This is not really the only thing that's possible. So how did it affect my relationships? It started to change them drastically, just by nature. Right? The relationship is like a constantly changing thing that is not something necessarily like we initiate. The relationship is what it is. Right? The relationship between me and you exists because you exist and I exist, not because we have decided that there's a relationship. Mm-hmm. So as I was changing and as my perception is changing, the relationships were changing. So my universe, my world view, the people within the world, all of that started to change. But I didn't have the maturity or the insight to recognize that. So something just felt very wrong. Right? At the same time, it was so exciting. It was so fun. Right? Because I got to spend 4 to 6 hours on a weekend completely by myself, just navigating this insane thing we call reality. Because that was really started to where I started to open up and flower and blossom. It was like, now I want to talk to other people about it. So I was trying to talk to other people about it. And then they just look at me as like, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. So it made relationships very difficult. Yeah, it made the relationships really difficult because then it started to confuse my relationship with myself too. So what am I? Right?
Yeah. Did you make new relationships? Is that when you turned towards meditation and spend a lot of time in the monasteries because they might have been on that wavelength that you were?
Well, no, I didn't really, and that was the problem. Like, I was still trying to go exist in the life that I came from, being a completely different person. And even when I did find the relationships with people that were a little bit more resonant with me, I was still such an avoidant person. I couldn't really be vulnerable with them. So it's like where I was uncomfortable, and then where I needed to be was also uncomfortable because it was unfamiliar and it was different. And it was asking me to be vulnerable.
So when did you get this surgence to teach meditation and let other people
explore
what you've explored?
When did that happen? I guess I can say it happened whenever I found that there was a way to actually bring it in. I became like an evangelist meditator. I was just like, you gotta try it. You gotta meditate. Man, like imagine how much better your fitness would be if you meditated. You gotta try it. Everything gets better. Everything is improving. So I started I guess it started to happen because I was talking to clients about it. Right, my clients were really, very unprofessional and inappropriate. But my personal life started to blend with my work, my professional life. So I started talking a lot to my clients about all these things. And then at some point down the line, someone wanted to learn how to meditate, and I started, trying to help them. And when it came to offering psychedelic journeys for people, it started, when I started tripping with my ex-wife, with my current girlfriend. It started with them, and then started to talk to other people about it. And I had to develop such an ego around it. I was like, oh man, I know how to do this. Like, there's a right way to do it, and you're probably not going to find it if you just take mushrooms. Right? There's set and setting and all this kind of thing. You have all your affairs in place. So then that's, I guess, where it started. So someone wanted to trip with me, and I was like, okay, let's go through preparation. Let's do it my way. Mm-hmm. And then had some pretty profound experiences with other people, and then it just kind of naturally progressed from there.
Was there a point, you obviously still training, personal training people physically and in the gym. So was there a large part of that where you felt really inauthentic and faking it? And then did it transition into a place where you were bringing more of your personal into work and we're known more for offering this wide variety instead of just the physical, sort of upping the weight on the bench press and, trying to get leaner and,
I think there was a point, well, it was authentic up until the point where it wasn't. So it went from being my authentic way of being in the world. I was very authentic there. That was my pursuit. That was my truth. That was what I wanted for the world and for myself. And then it became inauthentic. Just personal training, just helping people to look better and get stronger. That started to be really uninteresting to me, right? Because of my injury, I started diving into very, alternate paradigms of thinking about the body. I started studying what's, an institute called Postural Restoration Institute. I met a mentor, a friend that was teaching me and helping me to expand my way of understanding myself, because he was the only person, a few of them, they were the only people that were really able to introduce a way for me to recover my hip. It went from just straight general strength and fitness the way I was doing it to now being peaked, inspired by my injuries to start to look at the body in a different way, which was perfectly coinciding with me looking at the mind and reality in a different way through psychedelics, through meditation. And then there was a very distinct point where I wanted so desperately just to be in the meditation spirituality space. I wanted to just be in the psychedelic space. All I ever wanted to do was talk to people about the nature of their minds, about who they are from an existential and psychological standpoint, and then how to explore the world through psychedelics. There was a time where all I wanted to do was that. So when I was in the gym, it was like I was good at it, and that was about it. Like I made my money doing that, but what I really wanted was to do other stuff. And then there was a point where I realized they're actually not different. That's when the integration started to happen, where then I started to recognize for myself, I'm not training bodies. I am helping people to explore themselves in new ways, using the physical body as a tool, using the mind as a tool, using entheogenic substances as a tool. So that's kind of how I see it now.
So you mentioned a good metaphor earlier where you're looking at a piece of art, and when you're looking at it front on, it looks like a piece of art. It looks like a beautiful bit of imagery. You can see the depth of it, and you can see the different things going on, and the sort of journey of that art. But when you go to the side of it, it looks like squiggly lines. It looks like a mess, and you almost have such a small snapshot of what that art is, and you can almost look at that, in terms of life. There's many times in my life where I've sort of seen it from front on, and it looks like a beautiful mess, if you like. It looks like what it's meant to look like, and if you were the one that sort of produced this art, it would be beautiful. But then at times I feel like you can fall into that place where you side on again, and I imagine that side on sort of viewpoint, that glance, for me feels a bit like that sort of, we're talking about the way that you look at the world, the concepts, and how you're measuring yourself in the world, what you're striving to do. Because at times my life feels messy, at times it feels messy. It feels a bit like I need to be working on something. And then it's like, well, what ultimately is that work for? And then it's like, well, I love the process, I love the journey of it. And I love these conversations, which within the whole journey of it. And you talk about the conception, you talk about the sort of ways that you measure yourself and how people look at it. And you can drop back into that side-on view, that sort of snapshot. That's sort of what I picked up from that metaphor. How do you feel like you live your life now? Do you feel like you have the clear picture a lot of the time? And do you train to keep that clear picture? Or is it something that you feel like you drop back into every now and then, and that's all part of it?
Wow, what a great question.
I know, I mean it's freestyling here.
You're good at this. Good at this.
I don't know.
So, clear picture. Do I see the clear picture? Not often enough. I get in the territory I feel like a lot of the time, but that's also constrained by what I believe to be a clear picture is, right? And my belief of the clear picture is this seamless formless, beautifully chaotic, constantly changing, impermanent process that is life, where nothing is fixed. Anything that seems to be fixed is representative of an illusory point of view, not a non-functional point of view, not a wrong point of view, but just a point of view. It implies that you are here and the world is out there. One thing that's changed a lot for me over a lot of my meditative experience and some of the more profound experiences that I've had is that I've come to recognize one thing for certain that is the most clear to me when I am feeling my best, when my conditions are right, when my mind is quiet, when my heart is full, is that this life is a complete and utter mystery. Right? You know, if you were to ask me, I think I'm in pretty good condition right now, how I see the world, the honest thing is things seem to be happening. I don't know what those things really are. It's hard for me to really kind of know where I end and this begins. But it's not like some like weird psychedelic experience that I'm having all the time. It's just like the world is here and I just don't really know what exactly it is. I'll call it a cup, call that tea, call this recording device, Natalie, Stevie, Elish, call these things that thing, but not really what it is. So much more. And then when my conditions are not right, because you have to, in the tradition that I'm currently practicing, which is in Rinzai Zen, there's a big emphasis on being able to integrate clearer and clearer seeing. You go into a formal practice as the easiest way of being able to attain the ultimate viewlessness, right? Awakening, enlightenment, satori, whatever you want to call it. And then you have to, when you attain that through a condition called samadhi, which is an absorption. And then you integrate that absorbed state with everything.
Can you explain those stages, samadhi and enlightenment, what you deem them to be?
Samadhi, as I've learned it, is a state of complete absorption. In the way most people think of it as a state of concentration, very high concentration. But the teacher that I have draw a lot of my current, views from, sees problem with viewing it as focus or concentration because it's inherently dualistic. Instead, it's an absorption. It's a becoming. It's a state in which the boundaries of here and there have melted away, where the subject and object have now become one. Right? So it's in that state, in that condition, you have the highest probability to see things as they really are, which is an enlightenment experience, according to Zen texts, Zen Buddhism, as my limited understanding of it. So, therefore, enlightenment is the seeing of one's true nature, the seeing of the truth beyond all appearances. When a famous Zen master, Dogen Zenji, said, the body and mind fall away, where the world dies and what's true remains. That is my conception of enlightenment. But that can be, there are grades of enlightenment to some degree. I mean, you can kind of get a glimpse of the nature of things, and then you can have a very deep and clear seeing of things as they really are in such a way that starts to actually drastically change we'll just say, in the words of Shinzen Young, who's another meditation teacher, there's a figure ground reversal in your understanding of the truth. Right? So it's not like I'm Elish trying to be, I'm Elish trying to see the formless world. Instead, Elish is a product of the formless world. The formless world, the formlessness, the oneness, the nowness of everything, the thisness of everything is first and foremost. Elish is secondary. So samadhi is that state of absorption that we try to attain in meditation, in Zen meditation. You become absorbed into your practice so much to the point where you fall away. And whatever it is you're doing falls away. And what's left is the struggle with using language. What's left is the universe experiencing itself. Experiencing itself.
Without the layers of the concepts that you're talking about, without the layers of everyday programming and thinking and all of that stuff, that falls away.
That as your primary way of seeing the world falls away. Because there's a Buddhist sutra called the Heart Sutra, in which it says emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Emptiness is the true nature of things, right? And then form is the amalgamation of, is the thingness of things. Form is what something is an appearance, is what we call it, right? Cup is a form, but the true reality of the cup is formless, right? So you see through the conceptions. You see the conceptions are not other than that which they are that which they are conceiving, right? That which they are representing. So the symbol, we'll just say the concept is the symbol, is not other than that which it symbolizes, right? So it's not that concepts now just disappear. The concepts are no longer a real thing. It's just you recognize, you see the true nature that concepts are a thing, but they do not exist on their own, right? They're not real through and through. They don't have an independent existence. So it's the seeing through of conception. The state of perfect samadhi and clarity is a state of minimal, or maybe we could even say zero, conceptual holding. But in reality, how it's exercised in reality is to recognize that when concepts do arise, what they naturally do because of the mind from which they come from, we recognize that the concept is not true.
So what sort of like problems do people come to you with, and how do you see the change or the transformation when you work with these people?
Pain. These days, more kind of psychological and existential pain, but in general, pain of many sorts.
Existential meaning?
Pain in their understanding of who they are, the suffering of not knowing who you are. So we can say more spiritual pain. Like existential, spiritual, maybe interchangeable.
Is that coming up against trying things and realizing that it's not the answer in terms of
maybe
achieving, and like what? How do these people? What's the output of not knowing who you are?
So those people are generally already on a spiritual path when they come to me for that question. So they've been meditating, they have their own kind of practice, and they are looking to go deeper. Right? So then I help them to whatever degree I can to kind of figure out where their path they are and where they might be tripping up. Right, no pun intended. But where they might be, where their way of seeing and understanding themselves could be preventing them from seeing something further, seeing something bigger. Which often means I have to somehow make a judgment about whether or not they see things clearly or not, which is tough. But so those are those people that are suffering from that kind of pain, that are coming to me specifically for that, are generally already rather seasoned meditators and practitioners of spirituality or whatnot. Mm-hmm. The other people are always referrals from my previous clients that suffered from some kind of chronic or terminal illness or otherwise physical pain. Right? So people generally come to me for pain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then how I help them just completely depends on where they are. Not everyone meditates. I don't push anyone to see the world in a way too drastic from their own seeing. Mm-hmm. Right? Because from my standpoint, going the path that I went is not necessary. Mm-hmm. Right? I aspire for enlightenment, but no one else needs to.
Is that your mission now? Not mission, but aspiration?
I would say so. And probably because to me, enlightenment represents the liberation of all suffering, and then the ultimate way through which I can then help others to be liberated from their suffering. Mm-hmm. Right, so I guess you could say that's my goal. My goal is at this moment, my goal is really to end my suffering. Whether I call that enlightenment, I don't know. But yeah, because I spoke a little bit about it, just dealing with chronic illness for the last almost a year. Yeah, getting to points of where I just don't know what's going on, and a lot of people don't know what's going on. Like for me, I've finally gotten to a point where at times I can really sit down and I don't know what I want other than to stop suffering. And I don't care what it's going to take. I don't care if I have to sit on a cushion for 6 hours a day. I don't care if I have to friggin' drink chicken broth for the next year. I don't care I don't care how much I have to suffer if it means I won't suffer anymore.
Are you alluding to your chronic illness that you've had specifically, or also mental suffering as well?
All of it. So there is also, for me, there is, I think right now the chronic illness is really giving me motivation. Right? This very nonlinear and rather treacherous suffering that I've been going through is giving me a lot of motivation to continue on my already rather deeply ingrained spiritual path. So that existential angst I have to really know who I am is now being bolstered by the chronic illness. So they're kind of motivating and fueling each other.
And how do normal goals look like for you? Do you set normal goals?
Yeah. Well, I'm not very good at it. Like I said, I don't really fit into the traditional mold. So goal setting is something I know I need to get better at. The goals that I do tend to set are very lofty. Right. But fortunately, I'm crazy enough to actually maybe just throw caution to the wind and go for it.
Yeah. You know, if you set the direction, you'd be going that way.
Yeah, right. Like for me, the goals that I set are not as actionable as I think they could be. I think that's a science in and of itself. I need to really kind of come face to face with is that a lot of my own personal limitations right now have to do with the way that I see the future and the way I construct the future for myself. So when it comes to goal setting, I have the bigger goals that I want. That's nailed down, pat, probably not going to change.
What are they? Is that
to be happy beyond conditions, to enjoy the life that I have, no matter what's happening, and to support anyone that I can with their own lives. That's my basic drive. That's what I want. All I want is to be deeply happy beyond conditions and to be of service to the world. That's it. To have, and of course, having all of the beautiful things that come with it. To have beautiful, deep relationships, to be able to be vulnerable with the world and be a beacon for vulnerability. And to be someone that, I use this image in my head all the time. I want to be the umbrella in the storm for people to hide under when they don't have anything. That's kind of the image that I have for myself. I want to work on myself so that I can support that. I can hold the umbrella up to the rain, and those who need it can come under, and we can have a good time.
yeah.
Before you go back on your path and you go on your own journey, right? Let's have a good time. Let's at least feel safe together for at least one moment before you go. Yeah,
love that. I mean, they're good goals. They seem like big missions, mate. They seem like big missions, but worthy missions as well. 100%. We've gone a good amount of time on this podcast. I've enjoyed it, and I've probably gone really deep, being selfishly, just asking you the deep questions, being selfish to get some understanding on that. Thinking about other people and wondering if you yourself would want to do it, but I'm wondering about a 5, 6, 7 minute meditation.
Yeah.
To knock it to finish in style.
Sure. Well, what is there any kind of thing you wanted to put in the spotlight for this meditation? Anything you wanted to gear towards for the podcast?
There's got to be a theme, hasn't there, from this podcast? I think the mission that you set there in terms of helping people not to suffer is a good one. I don't know whether that leads us into a loving kindness or Elish twist of one of them.
I don't even think I would go loving kindness right away. So for me, I think the first thing, or forget about timelines and stuff like that, or arbitrary hierarchies, but one thing that we absolutely need at some point in order to, I believe, realize truth to whatever degree we need it to suffer less based upon our conditions is the capacity to simply stop and pause and to be with things as they simply are and not necessarily have to solve the problem. We can't get stuck in the state of problem solving. We have to first be able to be in the situation so that we can understand what problem it is that needs to be solved in the first place, and have a place where we can then question our beliefs about what the problem is so that we can continuously refine and also have an opportunity to recognize that maybe there isn't really a problem. And it starts with pausing and stopping. Right. So just experiencing NCR. So I'd be more than happy
I'm good for that.
Yeah,
I'm good for that.
to offer that. So if you're sitting and listening to this podcast, I encourage you to get a nice comfortable position. If you're driving, drive. If you're doing anything else, just bring your attention to whatever it is that you're doing. And I want you to take a deep breath in. And let that breath go. And feel the sensations of your body. Feel the experience of sitting, of doing whatever it is that you're doing, before you turn to thought to know it. What is happening right now? If we don't believe any labels or any stories our mind creates about what's happening. Noticing the state of your body. Is it in a state that you would call restless? Are you at ease? Are you in pain? Are you feeling good? Is your breath slow and deep, or fast and shallow? Where are you now if you surrender the attempt to control what's going on? And what is going on if you don't need it to be any particular way? And become aware of your breathing. You can be aware of it at the nostrils, or in the chest, or in the belly, or all three. But bring your attention to the expansion of the inhale and the release of the exhale. Paying attention to each breath from beginning to end, and letting everything else that's happening to do so in the background. Each time your mind wanders, that's okay. Just as the sun shines and birds chirp, the mind wanders. It's not a problem. Notice it and then come back to the breath. When unpleasantness arises, let it arise. Breathe with it. Don't try to push it away. Don't try to understand it. No need to protect yourself by putting it in a box. And let it become part of the breath. And if you feel pleasant, don't hold on to it. Try to see that just as the breath comes and goes, so does everything else. And in this practice, we are trying to simply let life arise and pass in its most natural way. Nothing but the breath. Nothing but continual allowing. Allowing for things to be challenging. Allowing yourself to suffer, to struggle, and also to enjoy and to be grateful. Whatever is here, breathe with it. No preferences. Let the world happen in the breath. As you inhale, the world is contained in the inhale. And as you exhale, the world contained in the exhale. So attend to the breath as it is the world. So ordinary. The feeling body, hearing, seeing. And yet at the same time, a complete and utter mystery. What is this? Okay. Slowly come back to.
I should have done that at the start. I don't know. I don't know how attentive I would have been, but no, that was really nice. You know, the experience of that then was back is aching, seriously aching. It's like a sauna in here now because you turned the aircon off. So there was fluctuations of feeling that, and I think my mind wanders quite a lot. I'd love to know, in comparison, how much it wanders to other people's, whether that's the knocks to the head that I've just lived with all my life in terms of concentration and attention. You only know your own experience, don't you? But yeah, that was lovely. That was lovely. And I feel a sense of that calm again that we found in Times Square the other month.
You sound like you just promised.
Well, I saw the text. I don't even know how long that was. 7 minutes, 8 minutes, but
Yeah.
You know when you've had a massage and they ask you like, how do you feel?
yeah.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's just life's all right.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, thank you, mate. We should have done the outro before that, but I've enjoyed a free-flowing, inquisitive, unstructured, meaningful conversation. You're someone that I truly do feel is on that mission in terms of you've had that quest to eradicate your own suffering and plunge into that curiosity that you had, and have found yourself in a place where you are serving now. And I think that's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And I think, when we're thinking about worthwhile achievements and things to strive for, I think that's a big one. And I feel like you are doing it. So very much appreciate you stopping by and spending almost 2 hours with us when I know your time is precious and you'd much rather be on top of a skyscraper on acid.
Hey, this is more beautiful than any psychedelic trip ever could be.
Yes.
This, to me, right now, is the most important thing.
Where can people find you, mate? If they're listening in the UK, we've got a few listeners in Australia, a few in America and Ireland, and wondering where, if they want to jump into some sessions, whether it's meditation, whether it's PT, whatever that is, where can they find you?
Instagram will probably be the best place. So it's at Intuitive Strength, and you can find all the information there.
Awesome. We'll put all of that in the social media release and in the show notes too. Thank you, sir. It's good shit. It's good shit. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Boom.
Boom.